and bets around 20% pot, which I think is pretty standard with that stack to pot ratio. Daniel calls the ace of hearts. Doug continues barreling. Daniel calls, and on the river 4 of spades, Doug jams. The action is insane. I have to admit, it's a lot of fun watching all the action unfolding on stream. And yeah, especially Doug is taking a lot of creative lines, a lot of overbets. Daniel also started implementing more overbets. Yeah, but today we're going to be looking into 3 hands that I have prepared without Pyro Solver, without any sims, just sharing the way I think they're approaching those spots, what I do believe works well against population, how you should approach it, maybe differentiating between low stakes, mid stakes, and high stakes, so that you guys can also learn something from it. I don't just want to copy paste Pyro Sims here. All right, let's get started. By the way, what I just realized, I think I've just won the world record in placing the most amount of logos in one video. 1, 2, 3, 4, here, 5 on the share, and in the back, 6 raise your edge logos. That was definitely not intentionally, but yeah, I hope you guys don't mind. Raise your edge all over the place. Let's get things rolling. So the first hand starts where Doug is opening and Daniel 3-bets. The flop comes ace-9-3 and diamonds, and Daniel goes for his 20% c-bet. I think that's his main strategy on the flop, 20% and 80%. And Doug goes ahead and raises, which is very interesting, which I can imagine could be very value heavy. Could be ace-queen, could be a set, right? Especially when he unblocks an ace. Could be a strong flush draw, a king-high flush draw. Could be a 9, could be something like 3-4 suited, something like 4-3 in clubs where he protects against Daniel's jack-10s, queen-jacks that can't really continue against that raise. So doesn't necessarily has to be super strong, can be. Daniel calls, of course, he's going to be calling, I think, everything that is a 9, everything that is like, even something like king, queen, king, jack in clubs is going to be calling. And then Daniel checks and Doug goes ahead and jams. So here I think now it's either going to be, it could be something like 3-5 in clubs where now he starts folding out some 9x from Daniel's range when Daniel 3-bets something like 10-9 or 9-8. He applies pressure on a 9, he applies pressure on kings to 10. So it could surely be some combo draws. Could be a diamond draw. I would only imagine he's shoving a strong diamond draw. I don't think Doug would ever jam something like 8-7 in clubs, simply because Daniel still has some king high flush draws, of course ace-x, and if you want to jam, you want to jam strong flush draws, king high flush draws, so you're not going to be running into better flush draws apart from the ace-x flush draw, of course, which yeah, you are almost dead against. So yeah, I think either combo draws, king high flush draw, or a set or 2 pair, and Daniel snaps it off with ace-3. And I actually like Doug's flop raise for an turn jam on a double flush draw board. First of all, he gives a very bad price. I think Daniel is still going to be calling king high flush draws, where I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Daniel going to be calling king high flush draws. Might be if he has a gut shot coming with it, something like king 5 in diamonds that he opted to 3-bet pre-flop, or a pair, right? 9x in clubs, 3x in clubs, 4x in diamonds. If he 3-bet 4-5 in diamonds, could surely be possible. So Doug is max protecting against those hands. I do like the raise, first of all, because Daniel is c-betting very small. If Daniel would be c-betting more than 1/3 of the pot, then I think Doug is leaning more towards calling. But also, I don't think that ace-high boards are going to be bluffed as much as they're supposed to. If I would create a ranking from the most under-bluffed boards to the heaviest over-bluffed boards, I would say ace-high are the boards that are getting bluffed the least. Also, from my very little experience of playing heads up and observing heads up, I always feel like that people are still very hesitant in bluffing ace high boards. Doug is surely capable of having close to GTO frequencies bluffing on those boards. Not sure about Daniel, simply because he doesn't have the experience as Doug has. So maybe Doug is throwing in some small exploits where he wants to get in the money now. If Daniel has an ace queen, ace king, he's never going to be folding on this board, right? And he doesn't expect Daniel to go bananas with, let's say, jack 10 and hearts and triple barrel it off. But they chop it up. They both have ace 3. I was a little surprised that Daniel is waking up with ace 3 and hearts here. Surely decent 3-bet pre-flop, but you're going to have enough ace-x. You're going to be 3-betting, you know, your ace 9, ace 10 suited better, ace 10 often better. So I would leaning more towards calling those combos, but that's just the way I would approach it. All right, let's jump into the second hand, which was a crazy hand. Doug opens, Daniel 3-bets, and Doug 4-bets. And Daniel then just calls, and we get the ace 8-4 suited flop. And pretty standard, Daniel checks, and Doug goes ahead and bets around 20% pot, which I think is pretty standard with that stack to pot ratio. And Daniel calls the ace of hearts. Doug continues barreling. Daniel calls, and on the river 4 of spades, Doug jams. Daniel calls, and Doug shows the bluff with the queen jack, and Daniel calls with ace queen. This spot is a little bit tricky. First of all, we're 150 big blinds deep, so four betting ranges might differ a little bit from 100 big blinds, or they should. Of course, I mean, the difference is 50 big blinds, which is quite significant. I really like the call from Daniel pre-flop. As we can see, he's dominating a lot of Doug's bluffs with queen jack, maybe some queen 10, some weaker ace-x. And yeah, I mean, Daniel played it pretty standard. I don't see any other reason why he should raise the flop or jam the turn. I don't think it makes any sense at all. And so what we're trying to analyze here is whether Doug made a good bluff or not. I think his 4-bet is fine with 100 big blinds. I'm really not sure whether it's a fine bluff with 150 big blinds. It's definitely not terrible or punt or anything. It might be more marginal than with 100 big blinds. On the flop, I think he has a good hand to c-bet with, a lot of backdoor equity. He blocks ace jack, ace queen, which are the most likely 3-bet and call hands. I think Daniel will always 3-bet ace jack and ace queen and always just call. He's always going to be jamming ace king, so it's really good to have a queen and jack here. Also, I like his second barrel, especially for the fact that he does not have a club in his hand, because let's think about what Doug is trying to accomplish. Doug is trying to accomplish to make Daniel fold a hand like king jack in clubs, king queen in clubs, perhaps. Yeah, also even folding out jack 10 in clubs is pretty good, because if it goes check check, Daniel would very likely bluff with jack 10 in clubs, right? So it's also some sort of bluff prevention, that you're not getting bluffed off your hand on the river where you are actually going to be ahead. And when Doug is not having a club, then it makes it so much better to bluff, because yeah, it unblocks Daniel's folding range. So I really like his second barrel there. Once again, blocking ace jack, ace queen. And now the question becomes, is it a good bluff on the river? So here it's where things are getting a little tricky. I can imagine that Daniel is supposed to be folding some flushes. So if he's jack 10, queen jack, queen 10, folding some of the weaker flushes, Doug might, I mean, if he 4-bets something like king 5 in spades, king 3 in spades, I mean, Daniel cannot just call ace-x, otherwise Doug is just printing with his bluffs. So he surely has to defend some 9s and 10s here. I think it's probably going to be a mixed strategy, I can imagine. And then, of course, his ace-x, and as well as some flushes. So if Daniel is supposed to be folding, let's say, jack 10 in spades or queen 10 in spades, doesn't really make a lot of sense to have the jack in spades. Then on the other side, he blocks king jack in spades, which I don't think Daniel's going to be folding a second, or the nut flush, but not the nuts. I mean, it's double paired board. But I do believe that Doug is going to be bluffing a lot with his spade. So Daniel should probably choose a hand like 9s and 10s, to bluff catch the river with. I think it's like this chicken and egg game, right? Yeah, I'm not sure if it's so great to bluff with a spade on the river. On the other side, it's not too bad to have a spade, so you block some flushes. So, but when Doug is not supposed to be bluffing with a spade, then Daniel can have something like 9s, 10s, or jacks with a spade because Doug is not supposed to be bluffing. I can imagine that it's probably one of these spots where heavy mixing is going on. He should also not bluff like all his queen jack and jack 10s, right? Because Doug is, even if he bluffs also some ace x, he's only going to have ace king, ace queen, and then some bluffs with, let's say, ace 5 or ace 9. And those aren't like a shitload of combos. Whereas when he bluffs all his queen jack, it's like already 16 combos. Then maybe jack 10. Can also imagine something like if he 4-bets jack 5 suited, queen 5 suited, which we have seen is a thing with 100 big blinds, then his frequencies get very quickly out of control. I think that Daniel is going to hero call flushes on the river because he knows you're also not going to have a lot of ace-x, and he knows Doug's value range is also pretty narrow. So once he gets there with a flush, I think he's just going to be side calling, and Doug has been proven that he can be very aggressive on rivers, and he's doing a lot of overbetting and lots of bluffing on the river. So I think Daniel is going to be calling with a spade. So here it's more like an exploitative thinking, and therefore I think Doug's hand is actually pretty viable as a bluff. I can imagine this is a pretty good bluff in theory, but also against Daniel, where he's going to be, calling 9s, 10s on the river, and then on the turn, and then folding it very often on the river. Even something like 7s might be floating once again, jacks as well. And yeah, Doug is not blocking 9s and 10s, which is pretty good. He is blocking ace queen and ace jack. So I think overall the queen jack, the suits, then there will have minor differences in EV, but these can change dramatically. If you pull up Pyro, I can imagine the EVs of, let's say, bluffing with queen and hearts, jack and spades is, I don't know, a little bit better, a little bit worse than if you have the queen and clubs. It's just like very, very, very small. And the moment Daniel deviates from his GTO strategy, then also, of course, the EV of the queen jack suits will differ as well. So I think you just want to focus on, okay, what are the ideal hands to bluff with? And I think queen jack, jack 10, those kind of hands are actually pretty good. I think queen jack is like, yeah, given the deepness, given the blocker effects, a pretty good bluff here. So I really like it. Didn't work out. I mean, as we can see, he blocks the ace queen and hearts combos. He blocks the ace jack and hearts combos. Also a lot of offsuited combos. So Daniel can only have ace queen and diamonds, ace queen and clubs. But yeah, and he can still have all the 9s and 10s combos. Maybe he double floats with a king queen high, blocking ace king, ace queen could also be possible. It's pretty good, I think, from Doug's perspective. Didn't work out, but that's how it is. And the last spot for today, I think it was one of the final hands. Doug opens, Daniel 3-bets, and now Doug 4-bets, and Daniel 5-bets. Once again, they're very, very deep. Now they're actually, they're playing 200, 400, right? So they're actually 200 big blinds deep. That's pretty insane. And Doug decides to call, and the flop comes 9-7 deuce. Pretty significant pot. Daniel goes ahead and check. Doug c-bets very small. Daniel calls, 7 of clubs on the turn, and the ace on the river, which should favor Daniel. I think Doug is going to have 8s, 10s, jacks, queens more often. Daniel is going to be on ace king, ace queen a little more often. And he checks it on the river. I think ace king, especially when you block the clubs, so you block a potential bluff. So it makes it less likely that Doug can have a bluff in his range, right? If he has if he was goofing around with king 5 in clubs here, or even king 8 in clubs, I mean, he probably thinks Doug is going to be shoving any ace, which he should, which I think he's also going to be doing. I think it makes sense. Like if I have the king in clubs or king in diamonds, I would jam myself, because then it reduces the amount of natural bluffs that Doug can shove with. If we have, let's say, ace and spades and king and hearts, where we don't block any of the bluffs, where we unblock the king x in diamonds and king x in clubs, I see more merits. At least I see a solid reasoning for checking, especially against someone as aggressive as Doug. But I mean, and also Daniel is not going to be 4-betting ace queen or ace jack, right? He's just going to be calling it. Wait, the action was open, is 3-bet, 4-bet. He's not going to be 5-betting it. He's going to be calling the 4-bet. So he's going to be 5-betting ace king and maybe like a weaker ace. So like, let's say ace 5 or ace 8 suited. With 200 big blinds, I think I will only 5-bet the suited combos. Once again, you want to get it in good for such a large amount of money. Then you can check those combos. I think ace king is just too strong. And it would also be a blunder, horrible if Doug, for whatever. You also need to take into consideration that if you're going to be misplaying hands, or if you're going to have little experience in certain spots, then it's going to be the very deep spots. I think most cash game heads up players are going to be extremely good at 100 big blinds, but they will have less experience with 200 big blinds. It's totally normal because you're going to be playing it way less. I'm not saying he's bad by any means or he's worse than his opponents, but he might be lacking the confidence with 200 big blinds. He might be sometimes not 100% sure what's the ideal line. He might not know, okay, is ace 5 now a value jam here where Daniel can have ace king. He was goofing around with a better ace, like ace 10, or you don't know, right? So then maybe because he doesn't know, he's not 100% sure, he's going to be checking it back. I think he's still going to be shoving, but just if there's like the little small chance that for whatever reason he checks it back. In a 100 big blind pot, for sure not. But with 200 big blinds, where calling ranges are becoming very narrow, and you have to have quite a strong range or a strong hand to, where you have to have a strong hand, then of course things are getting a little different. So once again, because of the suits, that's how I approach it. If I want to have a strong checking range, I always pick the hands that unblock my opponent's bluffs. If I do block my opponent's bluffs, I just go ahead and shove myself. It makes it less likely that my opponent will have a bluff that he can be bluffing with. And I just want to get this set up for myself. Bluffs that Daniel could have, I think if he shoves maybe a busted king high flush draw again, I can imagine that sometimes king highs are 5-bet bluffing pre-flop. So, but also here, of course, it's very tricky to find enough bluffs. It depends on, he could also just jam, not have bluffs at all, I think. These are the spots. You don't always need to have bluffs in every single spot. So I think Doug is totally aware. I think he's someone who's just playing more his own range. And this is a spot that's never going to happen in this matchup again. So I think if Doug is going to have his jacks, queens, kings, he will call a certain amount of the time against the river shove, even despite of not having an ace in his hand. So I think you don't need to force, what would I be bluffing here? I'm never bluffing. So therefore, I cannot value shove. This is absolute bullshit. I mean, even here on this level, this spot, 99% of the time, even more than that, is not going to happen again, right? So don't force. I mean, of course, it's good to have bluffs here, but if you don't find them, especially now, since most of us are not playing these stakes, especially lower stakes, mid stakes, you don't need to have bluffs in those spots. That's now I know all these GTO warriors in the chat are going to be like on the comments, oh, we're going to be getting exploited. No, you're not. If you get exploited, you're not getting paid out here, then poker would be dead, right? So I'm analyzing the hands based on what they're supposed to do, based on what I think, but also, of course, want to give you the advice that you should take everything with a grain of salt and not see it as carved in stone, especially for lower stakes. But even in high stakes tournaments, if you watch me on Twitch or my live plays or reviews, I am deviating from GTO so often. I can't emphasize it enough to really try to stuff it into your face and try to play exploitative. GTO serves as understanding, as a baseline, and then from there we make the adjustments. And I think here it's totally reasonable if you really, because it's a very unusual spot. It's very deep, 5-bet pots out of position. You're not going to play these often. I mean, it's probably less than 100 pots in your lifetime career that you're going to be playing those spots. So it's not often. Most of us probably have not even played I cannot imagine the last time I played a 5-bet pot out of position, to be honest. Even though early stage of a tournament, we very often start with 100 big blinds, 200 big blinds, right? So there is an opportunity to play that stack size, but it's still not happening. And I've played millions of hands. So, but that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed my analysis. As far as I know, based on the interview with Daniel, Doug had pocket jacks here. So it would be interesting to see if Daniel jams. I mean, he doesn't need to jam, right? He could just block bet like 15K, 20K. Could also be viable if he really lacks bluffs. If you lack bluffs and you're perceived as very strong, then you can use smaller sizing to quote unquote balance that. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think in that session, Daniel went big. See you guys next time.